Police Commission Command Structure Report. Who's here?
Me.
Peter's here,
Peter's
Todd's here,
John's here.
John's here. Who wants to?
I got my team. You want me to know?
Go ahead.
Would you like to come up there or can I say something?
You can stay there.
Thank you very much.
I think you should stay on.
You what? No, I don't think so. I'm loud enough. Oh, great. I don't photograph well.
You know that.
Okay.
In my world.
We had our command staff meeting and there were, what, 8 of us? I think there were 8 of us that were on this, and we met for 8 to 9 weeks, and we did a lot of discussion, and John actually dove right in and found out more about the police than he quote unquote wanted to. Our recommendation was not to backfill the major position, and that was a recommendation of this subcommittee, and it went to the police commission, and we did vote unanimously to maintain the existing administrative structure, which is one chief, 1 major, and 1 administrative assistant. And then in anticipation of the retirement of several of our senior officers that are coming up, we as a commission recommended hiring a new patrolman with the money that was budgeted for the vacant major position. The reason we did that was we feel this officer will improve the overall morale by cutting down on overtime. Ought to be a monetary savings there also. We want boots on the ground, which is essential. We have the command, we have the Clinton Police Department strategic plan, which we went over very, very thoroughly. And we would like to be able to have the flexibility with enough patrolmen, women, to get these people involved in more diverse things that they're not able to do right now, like the DEA task force, the state narcotics. We'd love to be able to expand the detective division. We'd love to be able to do that for Clinton. We've got a lot more going on in this town than we ever did. Perfect example was the fossil situation, which is now going to...
It's being passed to federal agency.
So we just need to get more involved and more knowledgeable in regards to some of this.
What's the fossil situation?
The large larceny from a fossil store with the mall. A couple $100,000 worth of watches.
Oh, all right. Is it like a shoplifting scene or?
That's a larger scale than shoplifting.
Yeah, it's a couple 100,000 watches in the shop.
No, but sometimes.
Unless you're going in with a wheelbarrow.
Yeah, but it's not.
It's just
And then what we want to do as the commission is, sorry Kurt, I should have come, evaluate the situation somewhere down the line. You know, see how the administration is doing, and then if we need to modify it, then we would come back to you with recommendations. So that's where it stands right now.
Okay. So you're looking with the money that's already budgeted to add additional officer beyond the one that was already in the budget,
Correct.
which will go to 26 to 27, which I think is proactive in anticipation of potential retirements by the end of this year.
So we're
Absolutely.
not waiting 6 months. And then-
Right, and you get them in, so now Chief, you're gonna need some recruitment and, hiring costs, right?
Basically, if you could just transfer the money for the poly site, the uniforms, post, all that stuff from the salary line
Take it out of salary,
to
right?
the recruitment account. I have the form right here if you want to
Okay.
take a look at it.
Is that this year or next?
For next year, July 1.
Yeah.
Because there's round numbers, there's $100,000 in there for replacement of the manager. The new officer, what finance appropriated during last budget was $57,000, so there's $43,000 additional, so they can use that money for recruitment and hiring costs.
Just to make sure, the major position was filled by patrolmen. We have 25 guys currently. We just didn't promote to the major. Do you want me to do this? Okay.
Did you want a motion to end this meeting?
We can motion to transfer the $10,576 from the salary line item to the recruitment line item.
There will also be savings, Willie, by the time we hire the person. If we can't find a certified, we secured a slot in the October, so that would give us 1 quarter, only 3/4 review.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Come.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion on it? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries. Very good. That was it.
Thank you. I'm
Anyways, are you gonna talk about the 42 schedule?
We should do that during the update, when the selectmen report on it.
Okay, so 4-2. So we have one last meeting to approve the,
I hope so.
to approve the recommendation, or actually approve the contract. So we met for, God, it seemed like forever, every week
2.5
for
months.
2 or 3 months. And we ultimately negotiated with the union that we will do a 1-year schedule, 4-2 schedule trial with an opt-out at the 6-month mark for either the town or the union if it's not working for a number of reasons. We have benchmarks, one of them being obviously cost of the town, you know, if our overtime goes up or, you know, whatever other costs we can look at. Morale, we're going to try to do some anonymous questionnaires and things like that, and just general observation from the administration and how that's going. So at 6 months, we or the union can opt out. Big things are, because of the 4-2 schedule, you'll probably hear people say that, well, now they're going to get more time off because they're not working 5-2 anymore. What we did do was the officers are giving us what we're calling give-backs. They're going to give us 40 hours additional training throughout the year. That's going to be non-compensatory time that they're not going to, so they won't get paid to go do their mandatory training. So 40 hours, they're giving us back 3 sick days, so 16 hours in the first 6 months and 8 in the second. And then they're going to have a choice in the second 6 months of giving us either 2 sick days, combination of sick time, vacation time, personal time, or potentially we have an option of there being a little bit more training time that they could take advantage of, and we're waiting for an opinion from the Department of Labor on that. So, you know, we're hoping it works.
Plus the extra
union-
15 minutes a day that they're gonna.
Oh, right, and then
on
for the
their-
first 6 months, we're gonna try to do an 8.25 hour shift at no cost to the town for the 15 minutes, because the union believes that that 15 minutes will help with overlap with the guys getting in and out of their cars and their roll call. And so that's what they're gonna do for 6 months. The union thinks it's gonna be a great thing, you know, we'll see what happens, and hopefully it works. So that's the-
And they still have to get their membership to approve
Right,
the agreement.
right.
I don't understand what the town stands to benefit from this.
Let's-
The officers are getting 16 more days a year off.
Well,
What is the
don't say
town-
that though, because I just, trust me, this was I don't want that to be out there in the
Well, I'm
public.
trying to figure out that
Everybody's
15
days.
minutes, how that works out.
Don't worry about the 15, just go with
Well,
the
I'm trying to
training,
figure
the
out
sick
why
days, whatever, you gotta
it's
keep
more
that
important for
figure
them to
back.
get 16 additional
Yeah,
days
yeah, no.
out of the
Yeah,
schedule.
it's
But they're
being
not though,
6.
Carol. It ends up being 6.
Well, I'm looking at 8 and
40
10,
hours of
yeah,
training.
6.
80 hours, yeah, 80 hours. a day.
80 hours they're giving us back.
8
Plus the 15.
hours, I see 40 hours.
No, 40 hours of training,
Right.
Or
40 hours of other time, which is a combination of
6
sick.
days or
vacation.
personal days.
Trust me.
That's in
we-
the second
Holiday
half of
day.
the year.
No, first half is 2 sick days. Second half is a combination of whatever they want, two days back plus 1 sick day. So there's 3 days in the second 6 months, and there's 2.
That's not what I wrote down as you said it.
That's
You
the
said
deal.
40 hours of training and
Let's
40
wrap
It's
it up.
80 hours, Carol, it's 80
80
hours.
It's 80.
I had this already noted in the area.
in the entire year or in the first half?
In the whole year.
Oh,
because-
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
80 hours for
All
you.
right. But I don't understand, what does the town stand to benefit
They feel-
from this
The thought
schedule?
is that they're gonna call out less because they're gonna have more, you know, their shift time is gonna be, instead of having 5 days in a row, they'll have 4 days in a row, so.
They will actually go to
Their
work.
thought is that they're not gonna call out, which would reduce our overtime costs. Sending them to training with non-compensatory time, you know, arguably, we could send them on a day off, on one of their 2
And pay
days
them
off,
overtime.
and then we don't have to bring another guy in on their shift. They're saying that it's gonna increase recruitment because, you know, we've had a hard time bringing in certified officers, and they're thinking that if this is a benefit that we can offer, then they might have a little bit better, you know, track record of bringing in certified officers to Clinton. You know, you don't know if it's gonna work until you try it. That's what Willie and I have been saying through this whole thing. You know, the guys think it's gonna be great, they've gone out and talked to other departments that do it. This is a trial, it's not permanent, and, you know, when we get to negotiations next year, maybe it puts us in a better position to negotiate.
Well, you know, you say it's a trial and it's not permanent, and yet the new salary software that they're getting.
It's easily.
It's easily converted,
That's-
between 5.2 to 4.2.
That was the first question I
A couple
had.
weeks ago, was that it would be
No,
a
we-
fiasco getting changed.
After we talked to the, on our committee, sorry, I don't mean to.
No, that was my first
But,
question to Todd.
I said, then why get it, Todd, if it's that difficult, just change whatever your hours are. It's not worth it, so,
Right.
but you come to find out when they actually found out about it, it's easy to do.
My question to Todd was, you bring in a consultant to train, or bring in a consultant to set it up, would it cost us, again, to have the consultant come in and redo the schedule if we did that? He said no.
No,
And I spoke with John Carbone, and that was my first question, Carol. I was like, well, if we're gonna spend this money on scheduling software, let's make sure that, you know, it's gonna be useful. And John and Jerry Dunn both think it's gonna be, it's not gonna be difficult at all to change whatever we do.
and the chief ended up agreeing with that. Originally, he was saying that, kind of using it.
Leveraging that so that.
That's why they haven't put it in place yet.
How does the police commission feel about this?
Well, they don't,
They don't
have
have
to
to,
feel it.
they don't have to fill in,
Have
it's
to
part
say
of
because
it,
it's
it's an
part of
MOU,
the-
part of
It
the
doesn't
contract.
have to go to them for
No.
approval?
it was part of the negotiation
Part
of
of
the
the contract.
contract, the memorandum of understanding. If we didn't do the trial, we had a wage reopener in contract negotiations. So if we did not do the trial, they would have opened wage negotiations, reopened wage negotiations back into the contract. So,
And it may not happen still,
You know,
because he has
it's gotta go to his
he's gotta go to the union, and the union has to vote in favor of doing this. And if they say no, there is no reopener, there is no nothing.
oh, that's the other thing. If we opt out at 6 months, or if they decide not to go forward with the trial, then
There's no opener, because we tried it for 6 months.
because we, you know, agreed to try.
And I'm not so sure the union's 100% behind it.
But they went to pushing harder to get this thing done.
Yeah, it's been dragging for 3 months.
So there has to be some
You know,
kickback somewhere.
and it takes the detectives out of it, because the detectives work a 5-day week.
Oh, right, that's the other thing. So
And then
the
guys in the
SRO,
academy
the guys in the academy would not
go forward
be
to.
subject to 4-2 or to the give-backs. The detectives will still work a 5-2 schedule. The SRO will work obviously 5-2 while in school. And then in the summer, we'll do pro-rata give-backs, and then he'll go back into the schedule.
That's good, the detectives, because they've got the best
Right.
thing anyhow.
Any week is all
And
right.
they won't have to give us anything back, obviously, it's standard 5-2. So that's where we came out. We'll see what happens. I mean, we're gonna meet again in 4 months and see how it's moving along, and,
Yeah, and then some, the benchmarks is the 5-year average of
yeah.
the call-out days. So they're gonna look back 5 years, do an average of how many sick days were taken during this same time period. They're gonna go through, all of that stuff.
And the reason we did a
Money.
year,
Who's doing?
Todd or Carbone, but
the reason we did a year was, we thought that,
6
that
months.
really in 6 months, they could really
Don't
toe
call
the
in.
line and not call in, and if they really, because these, you know, a lot of these guys really want the schedule, because it's
Yeah, who
easier.
wouldn't?
Play the game.
But
want this.
so we figured a year, you know, you can only hold out for so long, you know? But really, I think the biggest benchmark is gonna be how much is it costing us.
Right.
If it's not costing, if it's helping us to save money, then it's kind of a no-brainer, but we'll see.
It's a morale thing, Carol, basically.
Yeah.
And it's not, Chief left, but I wish you're still here, my biggest research of finding out, the first meeting I went into the fire committee, it was, the chief said to me, he goes, John, I really don't know what you're talking about, when we were talking about the command structure, and he was right. So unfortunately, like Jim said, I researched as much as I could, so I didn't look like a jerk every time. So I found out, not just about the command structure, but I found out all about different departments around. I talked to several officers here in surrounding towns, and chiefs, and did as much research as I could. And unfortunately, our morale in our department, even though it seems good, it's not that great. And a lot of it has to do with being called in overtime. And I think with the command structure, we get another officer, and then least trying the 4-2, I think could, you know, get things, you want them to be positive as a police officer, you know, and I think there's some other positive thing that's going on, you know, being like the liaison for the selectmen at the police commission's meeting. I think the commission, even though it's relatively new commission, except for Kim and Phil, I think they're really trying to do some positive things. And, you know, I know the chief probably is not too psyched about either one, the 4-2 or the command structure, but I think he's accepted it, and I think he's going to,
How many other towns use this 4-2 schedule?
I don't know. I'm not on
There's quite a few. The differences are how they handle the givebacks and potential wages. And I mean, that, for us, that was the biggest thing I wanted them to understand was, you know, if we do this and we find out it's, you know, costing us money, but morale is great, you know, you gotta be prepared when we go into contract negotiations that wages might go down, you know, we might. But every town that does it differently. There's a ton of different types of schedules out there. There's 5-3, there's 10-hour, you know.
9-hour days, 8.5-hour days.
Todd, I think Chief is really, he was talking about this 5-2, 5-3, 9, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
Madison does a 5-3 with 9-hour days.
5-3 9-hour.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a lot of different things you can do, but unfortunately, we tried to discuss those things from the get-go to try different types of schedules because of the way the memorandum was written. 4-2 was the only thing on the table.
And the emphasis was that for the givebacks, it had to be meaningful time.
Right, they couldn't just give us,
Comp time,
Comp
stuff
time.
like that, that doesn't, not everybody gets, and it's gotta be meaningful time. It's gotta be time that actually, when it's used, costs money on the other side because you're filling the slot with overtime.
it had to hurt a little bit
Right.
for me, so.
So,
But according to the union, the towns that do the 4-2 schedule, it works well. Now, I asked them when they did the research to go out and look at towns that were similar size to ours, with a similar size police force. It's tough because you look at the schedule and, you know, Chief went and did all these spreadsheets showing us how many guys are in each shift and, you know, how many guys he might have extra if he was on 5-2 versus or 5-3 versus the 4-2. But when you do the schedule, you can't leave the guys out who are out on leave. So you're running the rotation based on the fact that you have a certain number of active officers. So you've got holes that are just there because you've got guys out on leave. But you've got one guy coming out of the academy, one that's just going in, he's being sworn in on the 30th, I believe. And then talking to Chief, we think one of the other guys that's out on disability is going to be back soon, hopefully. So when you look at the numbers, it works on paper. So, you know, that's why we made sure that at 4 months we met to see how it was going and, you know, we can get out of it.
and then the other thing is morale, as John was talking about, it's down. Talking to Sergeant Dunn last week after our meeting outside, he worked going on 5 straight days of 16-hour shifts with the ordinance and stuff. I mean, that affects their ability to do their job, I think,
How
because
is
they're working that much.
the new contract with the redistribution of overtime working?
From what I've heard, it's not great right now.
Well, what I've heard though is that some of the, I'll call them newer officers, now what's happening is the guys that could opt out when they got called for them to not take it, now they're ordered in.
Yeah.
So it's alleviating the situation where you have that one guy working 1
Falls
hour
getting over.
overtime
Yeah.
in a whole month versus somebody that, you know, basically had no choice to come in. So now what's happening is they're ordered in, so there's nobody that can just say, I never want to work overtime. So it's helping the ones that.
Right,
kind of
well, I mean,
first-
that's the keystone is the morale. When you talk about morale, is they had complaints about the administrators had complaints about burnout on the parts of the patrolmen because some of these patrolmen were working so much overtime, but there were patrolmen who weren't working any
Right.
overtime.
Right, well, that's
And
supposedly,
that-
this is alleviating
I
some of
mean,
that.
And the way
I'd
that,
like to, well,
the way that order and procedure was put in the contract, it's up to the guys themselves to police each other. So if somebody's getting nailed all the time because somebody else is not responding to the call,
Yeah.
that's up to those guys to take care of that situation. It's not up to the command structure. So we'll see. I mean, there are still issues with some of the stuff they order in for, which I've gone over and over with the chief, and I'm gonna go to the commission about. I don't believe they need to order in for these road jobs.
Here, I've passed 4 officers in uniform between the post office square and
Well, these guys are big.
Lynn's office.
They pay for it, yeah, the contractor pays for it, but I'm not necessarily sure if you're talking
How
about
many
the
officers
guys.
are on shift at any given time?
These guys are not on shift.
They're not on shift.
They're not on
I
shift.
know, so there were a lot of people
Well, they're all
calling
working,
in.
they're working doubles. And whether it's, so that's my point. Is it voluntary? So if they want to volunteer to work the road job, that's fine, but don't make it an order in.
A lot of guys like to work.
They do, they'll complain about it though, but they like the money. So,
And it's-
so but recruiting wise, when other towns that have officers that are certified that may be looking to move somewhere, they hear that, you know, these guys are working 16 hours a day, they're getting beat up, this and that, the other thing. That impacts the morale, that impacts the ability to recruit pre-certified officers, because I don't wanna go there and have to bust my chops for, you know, so. It'd be nice if we get another pre-cert, but it is also nice to bring new guys in every once in a while too, to keep the blood fresh.
And if a guy retires, like, you know, we're just said about hiring another guy and being proactive, in case, you know, one of these 5 guys retire, doesn't mean the next time we have to backfill
Right,
that.
and you can let it go away
You
through
know, it
attrition.
seems like it's going fine at the amount of officers we have. We're just trying to hire somebody before we, in case a couple guys retire at the same time, you know. In this way, you're not waiting 6 months for the academy if they're not certified, so I think that's a good idea.
That's it, I had something else, but I can't remember.
Oh.
So,
That's all right.
Move on.
Mention next week.